The first time Zara Matthews stepped into the Grand Hall of Galactic Central University's Xenobiology department, chaos erupted. 3 students fainted, 2 requested transfers immediately, and 1 particularly dramatic Flaxian began molting right there in front of everyone. Zara couldn't help but roll her eyes. It wasn't like she was wearing a necklace made of alien skulls or anything. "Ah, you must be the human," Professor Crax said, all 4 of his eye stalks twitching in what Zara quickly recognized as barely concealed discomfort. The way he said human made her sound like some kind of dangerous bacterial infection. "That's Ms. Zara," she replied, intentionally adding extra cheer to her voice, enjoying how the professor's crystalline exoskeleton shimmered with anxiety. Excited to learn all about the incredible diversity of life across the galaxy? She may have overdone it a bit, but if they were going to treat her like a monster, she figured she might as well have some fun. The prestigious Xenobiology program at GCU was hailed as the ultimate place for interspecies education, a gathering spot for the brightest minds across the stars, all united in the pursuit of understanding the galaxy's fascinating array of life forms. What the brochure didn't mention was that being the only human, no, the only Deathworlder, meant being treated like a mix of a ticking time bomb and a circus exhibit. Her classmates, a vibrant mix of beings from what they considered civilized worlds, kept a strict distance of 3 meters at all times. The only exception was MX Pixlit, a floating gas bag who, apparently, had never gotten the memo about humans being dangerous, mainly because they had no solid form to harm. "Class," Professor Key Rax's voice resonated from his crystalline body. "While the university's inclusive admission policies have resulted in some unexpected circumstances, I expect you all to maintain professionalism," he added, swiveling his eye stalk toward the still molting Flaxian. Even in the presence of our new colleague, Zara sat down in the reinforced chair they'd provided, which, she had to admit, was surprisingly comfortable. She pulled out her datapad as murmurs swirled around her. "I heard they eat meat while it's still moving. My third cousin's roommate said they can survive being partially decapitated. Is it true they drink dihydrogen monoxide for fun?" Professor KRA's gaze was fixed on her, a mixture of scientific curiosity and mild terror, as Zara reached into her bag. The entire class seemed to hold their breath, probably expecting her to pull out something horrifying, like a severed head. Instead, she calmly retrieved a perfectly ordinary protein bar. When she took a bite, the collective gasp nearly made her choke on her laughter. This semester was going to be interesting. 3 weeks later, Professor Katichek dimmed the holographic displays in the lecture hall, his crystalline body shimmering with what Zara had come to recognize as pure academic excitement. Whenever Professor KTHX got this excited, it usually meant something big was coming, at least big by alien standards. The last time he'd been this animated, it was over single-celled organisms that communicated through interpretive dance. "Students," he vibrated with enthusiasm, his crystalline body shimmering with excitement, "I have an announcement that will shape your academic futures." His eye stalks quivered in anticipation. "Our next major assignment will be a field study on," he paused dramatically, "Nexus 7. The reaction was immediate. A wave of terrified chittering rippled through the classroom. At the back, someone began singing their species' death dirge. The Flaxian, who had finally stopped molting, started shedding again. "Did he say Nexus 7? Whispered Creeks, a silicon-based student, their crystalline form clouded with unease. "The Death World." Zara's attention snapped to her datapad as she quickly pulled up the details. "High gravity at 1.3 Earth standard, dense jungle terrain, a highly active ecosystem, and mild acid rain." She grinned. It sounded like a typical summer camping trip in Australia, minus the drop bears. "Sounds fun." "As you're all aware," Professor KRA continued, "Nexus 7 is one of the most hazardous Class 3 planets in the sector. The gravity alone makes it barely survivable for most species. Throw in aggressive plant life, predatory creatures, and unpredictable weather." He stopped, and all 4 eye stalks turned toward Zara. "Although, I suppose our Deathworlder student might find it quite comfortable." "Sounds like a blast," Zara called out brightly, causing a few students to flinch. "Will we get to study the carnivorous vine systems? I've read they're quite the spectacle." The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by what sounded like someone quietly retching into their environmental suit. Later, during the preparation seminar, Zara met Bixel, a bioluminescent tentacle creature. While most students kept a cautious distance, Bixel approached her while she was checking her basic field gear, coming closer than anyone else had dared. "Excuse me," Bixel pulsed gently in hues of blue and green, their translator picking up on the light signals. "Aren't you worried about the environmental hazards? The atmospheric pressure alone requires Class 4 suits for most species." Zara glanced up from her supplies and shrugged. "I'll just need some rain gear and bug spray. Maybe a hat." She paused, considering. "Probably should pack some sunscreen too." too. Bixel's colors shifted to anxious purples. The gravity, the predators, the toxic spores. We've been in survival training for a week. This isn't something to take lightly. Indeed, the training had been grueling. The alien students had spent the week drilling in heavy-duty environmental suits, practicing emergency procedures, and learning how to operate various life-saving equipment. Meanwhile, Zara had mostly been helping the instructors by demonstrating extreme survival scenarios, which usually involved her doing simple human tasks like running, jumping, or eating without using a molecular deconstructor. Bixel pulsed again, a mix of concern and curiosity. I've read a lot about humans. You're impressive, sure, but even Deathworlders have limits. No one has ever scored higher than a 67% survival rate on Nexus 7. Zara couldn't help but laugh. Bixel, I grew up in Minnesota. We used to go camping in -40°C weather for fun. Trust me, I'll be just fine, Zara said with a grin. As the days leading up to the expedition passed, the preparations became more elaborate. Students were fitted with custom environmental suits that cost more than a small spacecraft. Emergency beacons were handed out, tested, and retested. Medical protocols were set up, and evacuation drills were drilled into everyone's minds, appendages, or relevant sensory organs. Professor KRA held daily briefings, each more dire than the last. Remember, he said, his crystalline form vibrating with gravity, this is not just a classroom exercise. This is a test of survival on one of the most hostile planets known to sentient life. Zara, who had been absent-mindedly doodling in her notebook, raised her hand. Quick question, can we collect samples of the local plants? Some of those carnivorous ones would make a perfect addition to my windowsill. Professor KRA's eye stalks immediately began swiveling in all directions, a sure sign of distress. Ms. Matthews, this is not a gardening expedition. The predator plants of Nexus 7 are not suitable for decoration. But they're so pretty, Zara protested. My dorm could use some color. From the back of the room, the flaxion began molting again. The day before departure, Bixel found Zara in the university's arboretum, sitting with a sandwich while reading xenobotany texts. Their tentacles were tied into actual knots, an unmistakable sign of their species' anxiety. I've been told to inform you, Bixel pulsed, their colors flashing with urgency, that the university will not accept responsibility if you don't survive. They've prepared 17 different diplomatic responses to Earth in case of your demise. Zara calmly took another bite of her sandwich. How thoughtful. Did they include one for when I come back with an A and some cool specimens? You're impossible, Bixel flashed, their colors now including faint hints of amused orange. Promise me you'll stick close to the group. The thought of you wandering off alone on that death trap of a planet. Zara grinned and pulled a small package from her bag. Tell you what, I brought some Earth cookies. Wanna be my field study partner? I promise I'll protect you from all the scary jungle creatures. Bixel's tentacles unwound slightly as they processed the offer. Are the cookies toxic? Only if you eat more than a dozen at once, Zara said, chuckling. Honestly, it's probably less dangerous than most human food. Bixel hesitated, then carefully accepted a cookie using a specialized handling appendage. Very well, but if we die, I'm filing a formal complaint in the afterlife. As the preparation phase concluded, Zara couldn't help but notice the shift in the way the other students were treating her. It was a blend of fear and newfound respect, likely due to the survival training demonstration where she casually lifted a heavy sample container that 3 other species had struggled to budge. Professor KRA had taken to observing her closely with all 4 eye stalks whenever he thought she wasn't looking, probably trying to figure out how a primitive Deathworlder had ended up in his prestigious program. Little did Professor KRA know, Zara had been the top of her class back on Earth, though she suspected that little tidbit might send him into a crystalline meltdown. The night before the expedition, the campus buzzed with pre-departure jitters. Students were tweaking their environmental suits, double-checking emergency protocols, and, in a few cases, making updates to their last wills. Meanwhile, Zara was in her room, packing what she deemed essential. Sturdy hiking boots, a stack of energy bars, a first aid kit, and yes, the bug spray. She also packed a few empty specimen containers, humorously labeled future pet plants. Gazing out of her window at the 3 moons of the university planet, she couldn't help but grin. Tomorrow was sure to be an adventure. If there was one thing humans were good at, it was turning life-threatening situations into stories for later. The transport ship descended into Nexus 7's atmosphere with all the elegance of a drunken space whale. Inside, 23 students in cutting-edge environmental suits clung to their safety harnesses, while one human, in hiking boots and a rain jacket, casually flipped through a field guide. Final descent, the pilot's strained voice crackled over the intercom. Gravity compensators at full capacity. May whatever gods you believe in protect your anatomical integrity. This is so exciting, Zara exclaimed, eagerly peering out the viewport at the dense jungle below. Her classmates, however, made noises that suggested exciting wasn't quite the word they would have chosen. Terrifying, suicidal, or utterly insane might have been closer to the mark. The ship landed with a thud in a small clearing, sending waves of purple plants swaying in every direction. Professor KRA's voice buzzed over their comms. Remember your training, triple-check your suit seals, monitor your biometrics constantly, and, for the love of all that's sentient, please try not to end up on the university's mortality statistics list. As the loading ramp descended, the first blast of Nexus 7's atmosphere hit them. The alien students' suits immediately began to whir and click, compensating for the oppressive gravity and the harsh, caustic air. Zara inhaled deeply and smiled. Smells like Peter. Looks like it rained recently. Bixel, their reinforced suit wobbling slightly, flashed a pattern of concern. What you're smelling is the corrosive acid precipitation. Oh, cool. The pH must be similar to apple juice, Zara remarked, unfazed. They began trekking into the jungle, their movements marked by the constant whine of overtaxed servos and the occasional curse in a variety of alien tongues. The local plants seemed keenly interested in their presence. Vine-like appendages stretched toward them, only to retreat when the suit's defense fields activated. Well, most of them retreated. A few appeared particularly intrigued by Zara, requiring her to gently untangle herself every few steps. Stop playing with the carnivorous plants. Professor KRA's voice vibrated with anxiety over the comms. They're classified as Class 3 predators. Professor KRA's voice crackled with alarm. But they're so friendly, Zara cooed, gently patting a particularly insistent vine. This one reminds me of my aunt's cat. Look, it even purrs. The vine was making a low rumbling sound as it unsuccessfully tried to consume her jacket. The first specimen collection site was located within a dense grove of what Professor KRA referred to as highly dangerous botanical anomalies. The rest of the class called them the murder trees. The objective was simple: gather samples from the local ecosystem without succumbing to it. Remember, Professor KRA instructed with gravity. These specimens are volatile. Use your containment fields and remote manipulation tools. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt direct. His words were cut off as Zara reached out and plucked a sample with her bare hands. Got one, Zara announced cheerfully, holding up a writhing piece of plant life. The cellular structure is incredible. Look, it's trying to dissolve my glove. The class stared in morbid fascination as the plant's acidic defense mechanism barely left a mark on her basic protective gear. In the back, the Flaxian, who had finally stopped molting, began to release stress spores instead. Their journey through the jungle was marked by what Zara's classmates considered close calls, though she classified them as mildly intriguing events. A swarm of flying creatures that secreted paralytic toxins. Think of them as mosquitoes, but more colorful. A patch of fungi that released hallucinogenic spores. College parties all over again. And a predatory plant that attempted to swallow her whole. It's like a Venus flytrap, but with more affection. Bixel, reluctantly paired with Zara for specimen collection, fluctuated between genuine scientific curiosity and pure panic. How are you doing this? They pulsed frantically after watching Zara casually step over what the survey maps marked as lethal terrain. The gravity alone should be crushing you, but Zara shrugged, casually stepping around a patch of dangerous foliage. It's just like walking uphill with a heavy backpack, though I probably should have done more squats at the gym last week. My calves are definitely going to be sore tomorrow. The real excitement arrived when they encountered what Professor KRA called an apex predator situation. A massive creature burst from the underbrush, all teeth, claws, and a menacing attitude. The alien students immediately activated their emergency protocols, with their suits shifting into defensive modes, preparing for an inevitable disaster. Zara's response, however, was decidedly different. "Oh my god, it's adorable," she squealed, already reaching for her specimen collection kit. "Look at those secondary jaw structures and the acidic drool. This is incredible." The creature, clearly perplexed by her lack of fear, roared loudly, displaying rows of razor-sharp teeth. Yes, very impressive." Zara nodded in appreciation. "The canary molars are perfectly adapted for crushing exoskeletons. Just stunning. Professor, can I include this in my thesis? I think I might be in love," Zara exclaimed, watching the apex predator, which was now clearly reconsidering its aggressive stance as it assessed her. The creature, realizing that it might be facing an even more dangerous predator, took a hesitant step back. "Don't go," Zara called, already jotting down notes. "I have so many questions about your digestive system and hunting strategies. Do you use those extrasensory organs for electromagnetic detection? The structure suggests the mighty predator of Nexus 7, terror of the jungle and destroyer of local life, turned and bolted into the underbrush. Fascinating behavioral response, Zara murmured as she scribbled in her notebook. Shows impressive signs of advanced threat assessment. Professor KRA, who had been frozen in place during the entire encounter, finally spoke, his voice filled with disbelief. Ms. Matthews, did you just scare away a Nexian Deathstalker by trying to study it? Is that what they're called? Cool name, Zara grinned. Do you think it'll come back? I have more questions about its metabolic rate. The rest of the specimen collection proceeded with what the alien students saw as a terrifying level of efficiency. Zara's sample container quickly filled with items that, according to all scientific standards, should have killed her several times over. Yet she approached each discovery with the enthusiasm of a child in a candy store. If the candy store was full of creatures trying to devour you. Look at this gorgeous fungal network, she exclaimed, poking at something that immediately attempted to dissolve her finger. The mycelial structures are incredible, and see how it reacts to electrical stimuli? Do you think it's sentient? Bixel, who had gradually shifted from panic to something resembling awe, helped her document the findings. Their tentacles, now calm enough, held a datapad steady. Your species' idea of gorgeous is deeply unsettling. They pulsed, though their bioluminescence flickered with what could only be described as admiration as they worked. Zara continued her lively commentary, blending serious scientific notes with what sounded suspiciously like baby talk directed at lethal organisms. Who's a deadly little extremophile, huh? Yes, you are. Now let me just measure your toxic secretion rate. The documentation process became equally entertaining. While other students carefully recorded their data from the safety of their protective suits, Zara's notes resembled a tourist's blog entry. Sample 47. Absolutely adorable gastropod with flesh-melting slime trail. Named it Fred. Sample 48. Highly aggressive vine system. Great hugger, slightly bitey. Sample 49. Unknown species. Tried to eat my boot. Added to possible pets list. Professor KRA, reviewing her notes, seemed unsure whether to be impressed or horrified. His eye stalks constantly crossed and uncrossed as he went through her report, especially the section titled Cutest Toxic Properties. As the day wore on, the contrast between the human and alien approaches became glaringly obvious. While her classmates meticulously followed safety protocols and maintained a safe distance from everything, Zara had somehow befriended half of the planet's hostile ecosystem. Even the murder trees had stopped attempting to grab Zara, though whether out of respect or fear was anyone's guess. The crisis began with a single drop. Just one tiny, seemingly innocent drop of Nexus 7's infamous acid rain managed to seep through a microscopic crack in Creek's environmental suit. The silicon-based student's crystalline form darkened with panic as their suit's integrity alarm blared. Incoming acid precipitation. Professor KRA's voice echoed through their comms. Seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill. The sky had shifted to a threatening green hue, and the local wildlife was already retreating to safety. All except the murder trees, which seemed to open their canopies even wider, as though preparing for a toxic rain dance. Oh wow, check out this pH reading, Zara exclaimed, holding out a testing strip as her classmates scrambled for cover. This is way more acidic than I thought. Neat. That's when everything started to go wrong. The combination of rising atmospheric pressure and the acid rain's unique chemical properties triggered cascading failures in the environmental suit's protective fields. One by one, warning lights began flashing across the clearing. My stabilizers are malfunctioning. Secondary containment breach. Critical systems failure. I'm too young to dissolve. Zara looked up from her pH testing, noticing her classmates were now in varying states of panic, their suits malfunctioning. Even Bixel's specially designed aqueous suit was showing alarming signs of distress, their tentacles writhing in confusion. Okay then, Zara said, slipping into what her friends back home would call mom-friend mode. Stay calm. Well, maybe panic a little faster, but head for that cave over there. The cave, which was about 50 meters away, might as well have been 50 kilometers for those adapted to lower gravity and relying on failing environmental suits. Professor, Zara called, already moving toward a student struggling with their suit. I'm going to need you to trust me and not crystallize in shock at what I'm about to do. Before Professor KRA could respond, Zara had already scooped up Creek's, suit and all, and was carrying them toward the cave. The professor's eye stalks vibrated in astonishment as Zara deposited the silicon-based student safely inside and turned to rescue more. That's at least 300 kilos with the suit, one student muttered in awe. Leg day finally paying off, Zara called back, grinning. Also, thank you, Earth gravity. What followed was a feat feat of human endurance that would later be deemed statistically improbable by the university's xenobiology department. Zara made countless trips, either carrying, dragging, or even gently rolling her classmates to safety. The acid rain sizzled against her rain jacket, which held up surprisingly well considering it was designed for Seattle's weather, not extraterrestrial acid storms. Your epidermis should be liquefying, Professor Katichek observed in horrified fascination as Zara helped him scramble to safety, his crystalline body clinking against the cave floor. Nah, human skin's pretty tough, Zara replied, already stepping back into the acid rain, though I might need some extra moisturizer later. This is way worse than that time I forgot sunscreen at the beach. Bixel was the last to be brought in, their tentacles wrapped around her shoulders. Whether it was out of fear or an attempt to help her balance, probably a mix of both, was unclear. Your species, Bixel pulsed weakly, is absolutely terrifying. Thank you, Zara beamed, gently setting them down. But you know what's actually terrifying? All these amazing specimens we're collecting. The acid rain was making everything move with increased energy. While her classmates huddled in the cave, watching their suit integrity readings slowly stabilize, Zara was darting in and out, collecting sample after sample. The local flora and fauna, driven into a frenzy by the acid storm, were displaying behaviors they had never seen before. Check this out, she called, holding up a violently shaking specimen jar. The murder trees are releasing their spores. The acid rain must be part of their reproductive cycle. This is incredible data for the project. Ms. Matthews, Professor KRA's voice vibrated wearily over the comms. The assignment doesn't require you to risk dissolution for extra credit. Risk? Zara scoffed, carefully labeling her latest find. This is just an exciting field trip, though I do wish I'd brought my better boots. These are getting a little melty. By the time the acid rain finally ceased, Zara had not only saved the entire class, but also collected more viable specimens than everyone else combined. Her field notes were filled with detailed observations on how various species behaved during the storm, all paired with enthusiastic sketches and plenty of exclamation marks. The best part? She had done it all while keeping what she called her tour guide voice. And if you look to your left, she'd say, you'll see a perfect example of adaptive behavior under stress. Notice how the predatory fungal colony is extending its mycelial network to absorb the excess acid. Simply fascinating. Please keep all appendages inside the cave unless you want to become part of the exhibit. The return to Galactic Central University was a stark contrast to their departure. Gone was the fearful silence. It was replaced with animated chatter about their unorthodox field study. The fact that everyone had survived and collected an unprecedented number of specimens had given the whole Deathworlder in class concept a whole new perspective. Did you see how she just picked up creeks and their suit? No problem? Remember when she called the Death Stalker precious? I still can't believe she named the acid-spitting fungus Squeaks. Professor KRA's final assessment with Zara felt like an exercise in cognitive dissonance. His crystalline body alternated between clarity and cloudiness as he reviewed her report. Ms. Matthews, he began, his 4 eye stalks trained on her. Your documentation of Nexus 7's ecosystem is disturbingly complete. Your specimen collection is unparalleled. Your survival rate was, he paused, his eye stalks twisting in confusion. Well, significantly above the average. Thanks, Zara beamed. I really wish we could have stayed longer. I didn't even get to catalog all the different types of murder trees. Did you know some of them tap dance when they're hunting? I have video footage. The sound that came from the professor's crystalline structure resembled wind chimes caught in a hurricane. The real shift, however, was in how her classmates now treated her. The 3-meter safety buffer had shrunk to just 1 meter, practically close by alien standards. The Flaxian had stopped molting when they saw her, though they still released the occasional stress spore when she got too enthusiastic about potentially lethal specimens. Bixel, now her regular lab partner, had taken it upon themselves to explain human behavior to their fellow students. No, she's not actually going to eat that. Well, probably not. Maybe we should ask first. The university had been forced to revise its safety protocols, creating new classification systems for human interaction with what had been considered lethal environments. The first rule was simple: never assume they can't handle it. As for Zara, she received top marks in xenobiology and a special award for her excessive enthusiasm in the face of certain death, which she proudly framed and hung in her dorm room, right next to her collection of adorable preserved Nexus 7 specimens. The only complaint came from the university's insurance department, which had to create an entirely new category of coverage: human-induced reality violations. I don't see what the big deal is, Zara commented to Bixel one day over lunch, casually munching on a death pepper from Earth. It was just a normal field trip. Though next time, I'm definitely bringing sturdier boots. The entire cafeteria cafeteria watched in a mix of horror and fascination as she took another bite, many wondering the same thing. What exactly did humans consider an abnormal field trip? Somewhere in the distance, a flaxian started to molt again.